Right, hi. So the recording has started. Well, it's lovely to see everybody tonight. Thank you very much for joining us on our Lovely People webinar. And I've actually got Lucy with me in person tonight. So I'm really sorry, guys. I'm not going to be able to mute her unless I mute myself.
I'm going to sit here quietly.
So hopefully this will be a fun conversation. As always, it's really nice to have a lovely guest on our show tonight. So we're going to be having a little bit of a conversation with Mandy. And obviously, if anybody wants to ask any question or anybody wants to join in, please feel free to do so. So it's really good to meet you, Mandy. We've had a little bit of a kind of introduction. We've kind of been chatting about where we're from and things before we started the recording. So I feel like I know a little bit about you
now. Yeah, there's a little bit more, maybe not much. But, yeah.
So I would really, really love to hear a little bit about your story, you know, and how you came across the principles, and maybe, you know, what difference it's made to you, why it is that you're so interested in these principles.
Okay. I thought you might ask that, and it's quite interesting because it's kind of like, how far back do you go? And I've always been, well, I'll actually go back pre-birth, actually, because my dad had a stroke before I was born, just out of the blue and kind of randomly. So I was born into a family where there was somebody with a disability, and that was my dad. But I didn't realise until I was 8 or 9 that he was different. And the only reason I noticed was because some teenagers were taking the mickey out of his limp. And I remember it really clearly. And it was almost like that was a pivotal point when I became very protective and very aware of, in my mind, people with anything different, physical disability, learning disability. My job was to protect them from the baddies, if that makes sense. So it's quite interesting how that was an insight. Soon after I came across the principles, I suddenly remembered that, and a lot of things made sense because of that memory. So then I went into nursing, of course. Well, I left home at 17, and I worked with children with learning disabilities in a Magpie home. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the program Magpie, but they used to raise money and set up children's homes. So I worked at a Magpie home in Kent, which was, awful, actually. Pretty grim place. And I worked there for about 6 months in a voluntary capacity, and then went to do nursing, but was always pulled back to, sorry, I think I've got some water coming in. I was always pulled back to people with learning disabilities. So then I did my learning disability nursing, and then worked in a lot of the institutions in Devon. I did my training in Devon. Thanks for that. Sorry,
That's quite all right. The more lovely people, the better.
My slave. Exactly. Thanks, honey. So yeah, I trained to work with people with learning disabilities in Devon, and have done that most of my working life, on and off, because I also trained as a homeopath, EFT, did Reiki. So it was funny. I always knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that people were perfect, and that we all had absolute innate well-being and innate health. Sometimes it was harder to see than others. So I think I kind of grew up knowing that. Partly I was brought up in a farming community where you don't have much control of what goes on anyway, you know, the weather, and I was just, as a child, playing in the fields. And but I kind of always knew that people had that innate health, but I was really surprised that other people didn't seem to see that. So the NHS didn't seem to see that. Social care didn't seem to see that. So a lot of the people that were working in those environments, in care positions, weren't very caring, is how I saw it. Now, I'm not a campaigner or an arguer. I don't like confrontation. So I wasn't one of those people that would sort of, you know, wave banners and things. So I kind of subtly tried to change things through something called person-centered planning. And I don't know if any of you know about that, but basically it was always seeing the person as the center of the process. So I was always working with nurses, social workers, teachers, gently trying to point them to the fact that everybody, despite their disability, was perfect. And we just needed to work with that kind of part of them, I suppose. But what it meant for a number of years was getting all sorts of tools and techniques into my toolkit so that I could do these workshops. And I was never particularly happy with the public speaking, but I was driven to run these workshops. And then I came across the principles about 6 years ago, and suddenly I had a language to explain what I'd been trying to explain to people. And I came across it kind of via homeopathy, really. Ian Watson, who some of you might know, and very quickly came across the Three Principles movies and became obsessed with Three Principles movies site for months and months and months. Drove down to meet Rudy and Jenny, burst into tears on their sofa and said, you know, this is going to save health and social care. And I think, you know, the story of Sid, where he thought, I'll just tell the local priest, who'll tell the bishop, who'll tell the Pope, and, you know, world peace in 6 weeks. I felt that was going to happen for health and social care. Interestingly, on my shoulders. So very quickly it became quite burdensome. And I was desperately trying to push the three principles to anybody I knew within health, social care and education. And unlike most people, I think, I suppose I hadn't realised that this innate health was within me as well. I kind of knew it intellectually, but I hadn't ever felt that. So I still saw it as my job to teach it to other people and support other people. And I kind of left myself out of the equation. So quite quickly I don't think this happens to many people, got a bit burnt out after I'd come across the principles, if that makes sense. So it was a bit kind of arse about face, really. I did train with Rudy and Jenny, and since then have worked with them on their training as a student mentor, and kind of run their retreats for them. Met the lovely Julie. Actually, I met you on Clarity, Julie, didn't I? Yeah. Also did some work with Jamie for a couple of years. And particularly the last 2 years, have really branched out on my own. So now I'm doing a mixture of things. I do a lot of one-to-one mentoring, which I absolutely love, usually sort of 3-month programs, one-to-one. And at the moment, quite a few people that are in kind of complementary therapies, so homeopaths, I've got a reflexologist, an osteopath. So I really love the idea of supporting people who are doing these amazing pieces of work, because for a lot of them, understanding the principles is the missing link, and it just empowers their the service that they're giving to people. So I've also done some work with the College of Homeopathy in London, so done some work with their students, because we're gradually trying to sort of get that into the syllabus. And also I run programs now with the local authority, so social workers, youth workers, special needs colleges, wherever really. A bit of a three principles tart. It's like wherever wherever I can go. But for me, I mean, the difference it's made to me is phenomenal, and I think more incremental. There haven't been any big Hollywood moments. I'm still waiting for a couple of them, particularly around money. That would be good. And around food. So if anybody's got any, please share them.
Right then. Come to us, Mandy.
So I suppose really the biggest difference has been in just my own sort of personal relationships. I've got 2 children, son of 24, daughter of 19. And from a parenting point of view, it just seems to have taken all the worry away. So I hadn't realised, I don't think we know, do we? We don't realise at the time just how much responsibility we're taking on, how much guilt, all of that stuff that we carry around with us. And it was recently I suddenly thought, actually, I'm still responsible, but it's more about being able to respond than feeling responsible. And that's lovely. So there's a real light touch parenting, which I think we've all benefited from enormously. I'm really close to both of them. And there was a brilliant example earlier on, actually, because my son, James, he lives at home. And none of you know him, so it's fine. But his bedroom is incredibly messy. I mean, the floor is just unbelievable. And earlier on, he tripped over the wire of his headphones, and they broke. And I was just thinking, my first reaction was, what a shame. Whereas, and I was thinking, God, a couple of years ago, I'd have put so much meaning into that. No wonder it happened, the state of your bedroom, all of that. Whereas this, it was genuinely compassion. It was like, there's nothing for me to do. And that's really been interesting. It's not my job. I just find, life's so much easier. I'm much more productive than I ever was, but in a much shorter period of time. So I was talking to a friend yesterday and I said, I think I'm just going to watch some Netflix movies again today. It's like, I would not have been able to do that a few years ago. So it's a lot more relaxed. And I think my kind of knowing, and I did work with some really challenging people in the old hospitals in Dawlish and Starcross and places over the years. But even then I kind of knew that there was innate health under there, under the behaviours. But I think for a long time, and this was with homeopathy as well, I kind of felt that we needed to help them peel back the layers so that innate health could then blossom. And of course, now this is completely different. It's like the target is the innate health.
Yeah.
And the behaviours you just kind of don't even need to see it a lot of the time. Obviously, people still need support, but I think the support now comes from a place of love rather than a place of need. So that's been lovely, actually. There's not so much work to do. There's no peeling back. There's no going back into the past. I mean, saying that's quite interesting. Julie and I have talked about this. I'm really curious about people. I love to hear people's stories. I love to hear what makes them tick. I love it when they come up with like past traumas or whatever. And I think, but what's so lovely, it's like we celebrate them when they come up rather than that being really serious. And let's start doing, and I love EFT. I think there's a place for it. But instead of me sort of tapping away with people or prescribing lots of remedies, it's like, isn't it great that's come up? That's going to help make sense of life.
Yeah.
So the workshops and retreats that I run are usually called Making Sense of Life, because that's what I find. It's like, oh my God, no wonder I'm like that or they're like that. It just makes sense, which is really refreshing.
Yeah, when we begin to see the thinking we're believing, it's like, well, no wonder I did that. And no wonder somebody else. You can kind of, that is massive, isn't it, when you start to see that?
It's huge. And I think, I mean, there's been, sort of a few slaphead moments as well, where for a long time, I thought I really understood the separate realities, the whole idea. But I was still thinking, they think differently from me, but there was still that sense of, because I'm right. I could still feel a little bit of compassion for the other person, but it was still, no wonder they think like that, bless them. Whereas now I say, actually, no, we're both completely in illusion. We're both, who knows what's going on. So I'm much better now at saying to people, help me see what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's been quite life-changing. Again, particularly with the kids, it's like, help me see why it doesn't make sense to you to empty the recycling bin. And it's said genuinely, I really would love to know why it makes sense to you to just walk past it. And again, with my son, it's like, well, I don't see it. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense then. How can we help each other instead of arguments? Yeah, how can we help? I mean, I was one of those mums that used to put stuff on the stairs, so much for people to take up as they went upstairs. But of course, people wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. So you see people like mountaineering up the stairs, carrying stuff. Yeah. And there's me sort of fuming, why doesn't anybody do it? And it's like, really, was I like that? I was so full of judgment. And it was exhausting as well, actually, thinking it was all on me. Whereas now I realise it's not all on me. We have different. I've also actually set up something with a friend of mine. Julie will know Mal, I think, Mal Donaghy. We set up something called A Different Conversation. And what we're doing is we run small community groups. We haven't done any for a while, but the idea is that we run small community groups, meetups, but it's all about having a different conversation. It's just talking about things differently. So we don't necessarily mention the principles until we're kind of into the conversation. But it could be, let's have a different conversation about stress or about health or whatever. Because I love what you're doing. It's getting to where people are at. Where are the communities? How can we go to them rather than expecting them to come to us and pay lots of money for big trainings. It's lovely to see sort of hubs, I think, all over the country sharing the principles now.
Yeah, because for me, it very much made, it changed so much for me. I was really interested in actually bringing it to people around me, bringing it back here.
Yeah.
And cool.
Yeah.
And it is amazing, isn't it, when we I can totally get that place when you're saying ask those questions from a different place in you, because I would have been very much like it sounds like it's the same question when it's why don't you empty the recycling bin, but when it is no, actually why don't you empty the recycling bin is quite a different question to why don't you empty the recycling bin. It is.
Yeah.
And although the question itself is the same, it is very much when we are curious about why, what is your thinking around that? What is actually going on for you here? And it's way easier. And I think that kind of expands things for us to see how differently people see things.
And also knowing that we're learning all the time as well. So there's a genuine help me see this. I remember with the whole Brexit thing, I was at my mum's in Devon and my two brothers were there. And one voted stay, one voted leave. Is that right? Leave and stay. And they started just this arguing. And I'm like, look, please, let's just listen. And one of my brothers, who I'd voted differently to him, I was genuinely saying, Steve, help me out here. I'd love to hear why it made sense to you. And it didn't change my mind, but it gave me a much better understanding of why he had voted for that. So that instead of the three of us at loggerheads, it was like, let's try and find out what's going on for each other. So then we understood from my little brother, he works on a farm in Devon, we understood his point of view. It made sense the way he was talking. And it was a genuine, not trying to change his mind. That's normally when we have discussions like that because we want to change the other person's mind. This was genuinely, tell me what you're seeing, because I'm really interested. I'm curious to know what you're seeing. And then listening with literally nothing on your mind or a completely open mind, which, I like a lot of us, I think I'd done a lot of training on how to listen when I was nursing and doing homeopathy, but I was listening with a lot on my mind. I was listening to give an answer or listening to give advice. Whereas this listening with literally nothing on your mind is just, it's hard to describe really, because the connection that comes from that place is healing in itself. Just being in a connected space with somebody when they know that you're not trying to fix them. And you know that it's not your job to do the fixing. It allows a completely different relationship, which to me is love and kindness. That can't not show up when we lose all the kind of preconceived ideas, all the judgments, which we'll have because we're human, but they take a lot less of a grip. So for me, and I think because of my work with people with learning disabilities particularly, because we don't have necessarily the verbal communication going on, there's always been a need for a different kind of connection and a different kind of listening. So I think I was pretty good at that anyway. So with the 3 principles, I didn't find it too difficult to drop into that space of listening to something else, whether it's, some people think of it as energy. And I'm not talking reading body language here either. It's kind of even beneath that and beneath that and beneath that. You just sort of drop into a space where you can feel it and it's like, there it is. Now I see you. Now I can hear you. Which is, it's just a lovely place to be.
Yeah, that's lovely. I could listen to you all night.
Oh God. But I think that's the thing. It's such a gift, and it's art. I was thinking the other day, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and we did a workshop a couple of weeks ago with 25 people who work for a youth offending service. So there were kind of teachers and a couple of policemen, some community psychiatric nurses, and we'd said 12 people maximum, and 25 came along, and we thought, oh, we'll just kind of go with it. And we were talking about it yesterday, and we've got a follow-up in a couple of weeks, and I was saying to her, it was really nice, but it didn't feel particularly exciting. She's like, no, it didn't. And then I was saying, but then why should it? Our expectations, we realised it was an expectation issue we had. We thought we'd be going in kind of like, yeah, this is amazing, it's so good to work together. And actually, it felt really ordinary and normal, which is lovely. It was kind of neutral. We went in and we shared what we knew. People saw stuff. And it reminded me just about how ordinary these principles are. And there wasn't any kind of great excitement. So then we said, should we do some more? And we both kind of went, yeah, we might as well. But it felt lovely ordinary, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes with the principles, people are a little bit worried about that innate health, that space of, I call it the creative space, but it's kind of like, well, isn't it a bit boring? Finding peace, finding quiet. And I remember my son a few years ago when I was saying we're all looking for peace, and he's like, I'm not. He was like 19. He said, I'm not. And it's like, oh no, that's the wrong language for him. So actually that space can be anything we want it to be. The creative space, the place of peace, the place of quiet. And I think with some people, if they're not used to that, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable, and kind of putting on a new pair of shoes or something, it's not quite comfy. So they kind of shy away from it a little bit. And often the group we were with a couple of weeks ago, there's one guy in particular, every time things got a little bit quiet, you could feel his discomfort, and he'd sort of like bark out a question. He'd just come down, you'd see him going, here we go. And it's like, yeah, but what about psychopaths? It's like, okay. It's like, and said to him, can you feel that energy shift? And by the middle of the second day, he was saying, I could feel myself shifting. He could feel the energy shift. And it was like a discomfort. And I'm genuinely not frightened of the yeah, but questions, but it was so interesting watching the energy change. And sometimes saying to people, can you feel that? Because it is a feeling.
Yeah.
We can intellectualize about it and talk about it, but it is actually that felt experience, which I think I was lucky being brought up in a sort of farming community. My playground were the fields and the ponds and the cows and that sort of thing. So I think I was in touch with that from a very early age. I think we're in touch with it when we're born, aren't we? But it wasn't kind of kicked out of me as it is with a lot of children, I think. Or they don't recognise it. They kind of lose that familiarity that we have with that kind of quiet, creative place. But I genuinely think there are a lot of people that it's so unfamiliar that there might need to be quite a few conversations. And for us not to be frightened of that. For us to stick with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when we're kind of pointing to something like this that is formless and difficult to put words around, because to some people it is really, really ordinary and everyday. So you can kind of, they're kind of like, well, yeah, I know this. What are you talking about? There's nothing weird about this. And then to other people, like you say, it's so unfamiliar to them. And it's an interesting one, isn't it, when because you can have people all over the board with this, whether it's which end it is.
Yeah. And I've certainly had people ask me in the past, how do you explain the principles to somebody with a cognitive impairment, or how do you explain the principles to somebody who and it's like, well, you don't need to. We don't need to explain the principles. I mean, we do in this kind of setting, but we don't need to explain the principles unless that's what we've been asked to do in that particular moment. We connect with people and then see what comes up. So with some of the young people I work with, I will say, did you see what you were thinking there? So I will point to thought if it makes sense. Kind of like, oh, what went on there? And play games with it. But it's not, my aim isn't for people to get the understanding, because what do you do with that? You know, we all know that can be helpful and sometimes not so helpful. And I think I get I often hear the expression, when I see it, I'll be okay. Or we say that to people, and it's like, what? That means nothing to me. I'm not very good with language anyway, to be honest, and metaphors and things, but it's like, when we see it, that's another future requirement. It's just we're in and out of, we've got thought coming through all of the time, obviously, and they'll have different feelings attached to them. Some of them are nice and some of them aren't nice, but they're all still just thought. I like to think the nice feelings are real, but it's still just thought. And remembering that can be helpful. Yeah. I think also, I mean, I did put on my website recently, and this was quite brave of me, because I did say that I've spent my life in low-level worry and anxiety. That was the phrase I used, which was quite odd, really, because when I realised that, there was almost like a frequency like this. I don't know if people are familiar with that. It's so familiar that you don't even recognise it. There's just a kind of heightened sense of anxiety, not full-blown, no panic attacks, just a familiar kind of sense of worry. And it was so ordinary that I just thought that's what life was like, or that was my personality. And I can remember being on second retreat with Rudy and Jenny, and I suddenly realised actually life can be fun as well. I don't need to be worried all the time. And I genuinely, it just came up to be seen, and it was like, oh my God. I just hadn't even seen it. And that really excites me. What else is lurking around me? Core beliefs, whatever we want to call them. What else is kind of stuck to me so closely that I don't even see it? And that's so exciting, because there's stuff, and I can't make it drop away. I can't peel it away. But as we stay in this conversation, or not even in the conversation, I can be just walking through Sainsbury's and suddenly I'll have a fresh new thought about something. I was saying to my son this morning, I went to use the washing machine. We've had this washing machine about a year. And I noticed right bang smack in the middle of the washing machine was this big blue button saying short 45-minute wash. Well, I'd never seen it before. And it was like suddenly my world had changed, literally, because I was having to do the dial every time I wanted to do a short wash. And it was like that had always been there, but I'd never seen it. And suddenly life changes. So those little miracles are all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of kind of have eyes for it.
Shall we see if anyone...
Do ask questions if you have any.
Question? Yes, it's been lovely listening to you. It's really great to kind of get to know you a little better and hear your stuff. So, has anyone got a question? Has anyone got anything they would like? Any comments? Anything anything really? Would anyone want to join in the conversation a bit? You can either unmute yourself, put something in the chat box. Whatever makes sense to you, if anyone would like to.
Or I can keep talking. I'm quite happy. I know what it's like when you're in a webinar. Sometimes it's really nice just to sit back and listen.
Yeah.
But feel free to interrupt if there is anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it is nice just to get into that place of listening, isn't it? And you're with your mind slowing and quietening down. And listening is perfectly fine. Absolutely.
Completely. I think we don't do enough of it. So, if this is just an opportunity for people to sit in a quiet place and listen for an hour in a busy day, I think that's really cool as well. Is that Becca? Have you unmuted yourself?
Yeah. Did you say you do Reiki or something?
I did. Yeah. Well, did I? Yes, I did train in Reiki, and sometimes it makes sense for me to put my hands in various positions. I don't actually treat people with Reiki. But I loved it and still think it's incredible. Interesting, when I came across the principles, I think I misheard. I hope I misheard, but I felt as if people were saying, don't meditate, don't do yoga, you don't need to do Reiki and all those sorts of things.
I think I heard the same thing in
Yeah.
some words, maybe not specific words, but
Yeah.
maybe not don't do it, but basically you don't need it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if you want to, they're okay to do.
Absolutely. But it felt a bit like when I first came across principles, you don't need it. It was sort of like, I'll just chuck it out. And I get that now, that we're in that meditative state all the time. We have access to that that's how we're born into that state. So that's our default setting, is to be meditative and clear-minded and all of those sorts of things. But sometimes it's really nice to do some yoga or some Reiki or whatever we like. Have a nice cup of tea. So I did think I had the 3P police in my head for a while, just sort of watching what I was saying and things like webinars. Am I saying it right? This was all me. This was all my stories. And I've dropped so much of that over the last year. So I did so much training in I love homeopathy. Sometimes it makes sense to me to mention a remedy to somebody during a 3 principles conversation. It might just come up. But it's not, for me, it's not what we say or what we do, it's the place that it's coming from. So if I'm in a connected space with somebody, who knows what's going to come up? It's not even trusting, it feels so much like letting go and letting ourselves be kind of lived, breathed, evolved by something other than little me, little personal me. This isn't about me. It so feels like it's about me, but it's actually not. And it's funny, just before the webinar, I said to my daughter, just 5 minutes before I came on, I went, oh God, I'm a bit nervous. This just popped in. And I hadn't been all day. And my habit, and a friend of mine, Janice, I don't know if she's managed to get on tonight. She's quite new to the principles, and she was saying, I saw her yesterday, she said, oh, what are you going to talk about? I'm like, I don't know.
No idea.
And she's like, really? I know. Don't know. See what comes up. And that's so lovely, because all the time that I would have spent stressing and preparing, I'm reading a novel at the moment. It's really good. So I spent some time reading. And that's not to say this is coming from a not caring place. I care deeply about all of you guys. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know, but I care deeply about sharing the principles. The power of the principles is phenomenal. This isn't Mandy's power, it's the power of the principles. And when I forget that and I think it's me, it's my responsibility, then I kind of lose myself and I get nervous and a little bit anxious. After the webinar, I will do my normal, which is a bit cringy. Oh God, did I really say that? No, I should have said that. So my habit is reviewing afterwards rather than rehearsing before, but that's okay. It will happen over here, if that makes sense. It's over there. It's not here. And it's just part of what I do, and that's okay. And I think accepting the bits that make up our personalities, or the bits that make up how we present, because we're all unique, we're all exactly the same, but we all present uniquely to the world. I have a much better relationship with the unique me now, thank God, because I was always trying to kind of clip the edges and, a bit bonsai, but don't need to do that anymore. It's like, well, this is who I am. And that's got to be okay, because, I'm part of that universal energy. It's so if I'm saying there's something wrong with me, that's saying there's something wrong with the grand design, and I don't think there can be. So that helps for the acceptance. Yeah.
We've had a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
No.
Thank you, Becca. That's lovely to hear from. So, Emma has said, how does Mandy answer people's questions about psychopaths, etc.? As I find I get challenged about this at times, as people say that is an actual chemical imbalance, etc. Although I understand it different, yet find it hard to explain.
I tell them to go and listen to Bill Pettit.
Always a good. There you go.
I know.
Or
I
go
mean, I genuinely think, you know, listen to Bill, but I've also got my own. The way I see it is that we are all innately healthy. We're born healthy. We are healthy. We have this innate well-being that can't be touched, can't be damaged. And we also have thought. We have thought flowing through all sorts of, all the time. And we get really caught up in that. And stressful thinking, kind of chronic stress particularly, will cause chemical imbalance. And that will have an effect on our bodies. And I do see people get really caught up in all sorts of, you know, terrifying and horrifying scenarios, nightmares. And my heart goes out to people when that's happening. And people do sometimes need sanctuary. People do sometimes need asylum. People do need, and that's if we're coming from that place, if we're knowing that people are still, love, it makes it much easier to give them the support that they need. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some awful things that we're capable of as human beings. There are, obviously. But I genuinely am less frightened of that now because I can see how that works. And I've also feel more hopeful in that the more we as human beings understand how life works, I think we're less likely to commit the atrocities that we are so capable of committing. So the school shooters, not just in the States, but here as well, sadly, you know, those young people, God, you know, what must be going through their minds to think that's a good idea? It breaks your heart, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
And I realise that that's not the kind of mainstream opinion, which is, you know, people like that shouldn't be allowed to. But it's like everyone's victims in that situation. And the ripple effect. I mean, James, my son was saying earlier that there was a boy who was a few years ago, he was knifed at the local school, killed. And James has just recently met this lad's cousin, and he said the whole family is still suffering. His younger brother is in prison now because he got involved in gang things, and the ripple effect of something like that. But if horror has such a ripple effect, imagine the ripple effect of love, which to me is even more powerful. So if we can keep pointing to love, and it's almost like not getting caught up in all the other stuff as well. And it's funny because I do watch the news now. I went through a phase of years of not watching the news, but I can watch it now. I can watch it and feel real compassion and sadness and upset, but I can see what's going on, and it feels important to me to actually know what's going on, to see what's going on, and to deal with the emotions that come up for me within that. But it's like, yeah, let's spread love, love and understanding. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I think that gives great hope. Yeah.
But also, I think, you know, not to belittle it, but if you guys could see some of the thoughts that go in my head sometimes, you'd probably lock me up, and we'd all be locking each other up.
Yeah, I think it is seeing the ordinariness, because, I mean, Sid said, didn't he, if we all just knew not to be frightened of our own experience and our own thinking, then that alone would change the world. And I've seen, you know, conversations I've had with people, it's been a lot very, you know, about stuff that's going on in their head, and they're, you know, then they're thinking, oh, I shouldn't think that, I can't think that, I mustn't think that. And yet if we kind of know, do you know what, like you said, if all sorts of things, as human beings, we are capable of thinking of the weirdest, strangest, wonderfulest, craziest things, aren't we? And if we kind of know, that's kind
definitely
of that's life, that's what happens to human beings.
Yeah. Was it Emma that asked the question about, who was it that asked the question about?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'd like to answer it a little bit more in that I'm much easier finding myself saying to people, I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
Or I can only tell you what I'm seeing here. And the guy that was quite tricky on the youth offending service thing the other week, I did say to him, look, I know some people who you could have a fantastic conversation with about this, and I'm not that person. My brain doesn't work that way, but I can introduce you to people. You know, there's Facebook groups that talk about the three principles in a completely different way to the way I understand it. And I said to him, would you like me to introduce you to people? And he's like, yeah, that would be great. So it's like, okay, good, because there's no point in me trying to explain something that makes no sense to me. Because you immediately lose the connection and the feeling anyway. So we can only share what makes sense to us in the moment. And sometimes that means saying, I'm not sure how to answer that. And I find that much easier now.
Yeah.
I would have found that hard a while ago.
I suppose it's that place again, isn't it, when we think that we're the one that has all the answers. And I think coming across this understanding has been brilliant for me, because it's kind of like, I know this isn't down to me, so that's fine. I know the person in front of me has got everything they need. And if my job is anything, it's to point them to the fact that they've got everything that they need. And I don't have to kind of know everything.
No,
Which
and
it's kind of handy, because I don't think...
Yeah, it was funny because Julie came to the retreat that we had this year, and I've been to lots of retreats with innate wellbeing and it felt really important to me because I'm always saying we all know, we all have this ability to share, and you know, from a place of love and compassion. So why do we need speakers at the front of the room? So it just felt important to me to practice what I preach. So we did this 3-day retreat with literally no speaker in the front of the room. And it was, I mean, Julie, if you want to say anything, but I know you might not. But somebody said it was like one long conversation. It was beautiful. And I could, watching myself, you know, I still felt responsible from time to time. And I did kind of facilitate a space. But when people genuinely feel that there's that equalness, actually, that's interesting. As I'm saying that, I'm having a little insight, because I've always made dad's stroke and all that sort of stuff. Inclusivity has always been really, really important to me. Equality has always been really important to me. So I think I'm sort of doing that with the three principles as well. Is I don't know any more than anybody. And I know you say that as well, Debra, and I love that about, you know, it's very much about let's include everybody in this. Let's have lots of conversations, because we've all got stuff to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. Yeah.
I love that too. I do. And because and different people hear things from different people, and you know, you don't know. It's not kind of making, for me, this isn't about making it about anyone. And you know, even when Sid, I mean, I think that was one of his things as well, wasn't it? This isn't about
it was
me. And I just don't think it is. This, whatever it is we're pointing to, this understanding, it's not about one person. It is about everybody. And we are all unique as well. In, you know, when you kind of said there's certain aspects of this you wouldn't talk about. There's certain aspects of this that I'm kind of like, do you know what? That's not where I've seen my insights. That's not kind of what.
No.
Yeah, there's other areas when actually I really like talking about this. This makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
So we have had, thank you for that. So we have had another question from Gavin. Is the NHS welcoming of your 3P input? Yeah, how are they feeling about the new paradigm?
Well, yeah. What happens is that I've got a program which I'm happy to share. It's called the Resilience Link program, and it's a 3-day program. I mean, it can be moved around and designed in any way necessary. So I use the language that makes sense to the people that are going to be buying my services. So I do talk about the principles, once I'm in. I'm not selling a 3 principles program. I'm selling a resilience and well-being program. So I remember going to a special needs college, and they loved the idea of this. It was working with their teaching assistants. It was a college where they had a lot of young people with very challenging autistic behaviour, is how they described it. So these young people often had their own kind of teaching assistants glued to them. So what they wanted was this program for the teaching assistants. And I said, well, it's a resilience program. We went through it. They said, that's lovely, really good. That's just what we need. But we don't have a budget for resilience. And I said, well, what do you have a budget for? And he said, well, well-being. So we just put a line through resilience and wrote well-being. And I know that's mad, but that's what we've got to be prepared. If we really believe in the power of the principles and we really want to share this, be prepared to do stuff like that. Be prepared to use different language. There was one group, they could only get me in for 3 hours. And, that doesn't make any sense. And if you speak to somebody like Ken and Robin, they'd say, well, no, you can't do anything in 3 hours. And it's like, well, let's try it. We've only got 3 hours, so it's that or nothing. So I did do the 3 hours, and it was fine. It's not up to us. God, does that answer the question?
You never know what seeds have been planted, do you? You just don't know what has changed, what has shifted, what possibilities you're starting. And like you say, it's not down to us. If that's what we've got and that's what we do. That.
Well, I had a meeting with, it was counter-terrorism people in London, and they were really interested in mindfulness. And it was interesting. Somebody had said to somebody else, let's get a mindfulness program in for the team. They've had a really bad year. Last year was a really bad year for them. And one of the bosses who I know, she said, oh, ask Mandy. She does something about mindfulness, something like that. So the next thing I know, I'm in this meeting. And it was like, well, I'm not going to deny this is mindfulness. So I talked about why this is like mindfulness and how we are in this mindful state all the time. Because otherwise I wouldn't have got in there.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So
where people are at, isn't it? Talking to them where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, it's not like we're in the 3 principles and then there's this world that needs us. It's not like that at all. We're all in the mix together.
We are the principle.
So absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
This is it.
In fact,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just before I went to that meeting with the counter-terrorism people, I dropped my bank card in the street somewhere, and it was like, oh bugger. So I quickly cancelled it, and then I went in and I mentioned that I dropped my bank card, and it was such a good teaching point, because they're like, God, you're really calm, aren't you? Really pissed off, somebody might have got it. And it became like, no, it's fine. It was actually fine. It was a very slight inconvenience. There was no catastrophizing needed about that. And of course, within their work environment, it's full of catastrophizing. And they all run at lunchtime. So they all go pounding the streets of Westminster every lunchtime for an hour, because they're just trying to quieten their minds down. And just them understanding that you've got really busy minds, understandably, but if we can help quieten that down a little bit, and then there's room for sort of fresh new thought to come through. And they've got that. I haven't done the program yet. This is the people who were interested in buying me in to do the program. So it's a long haul. I might never get there. But that's the other thing, I think, is for us to not have specific goals, to understand this might be a long haul, and just to stick with it. It's not up to us. The path isn't up to us, really. We think it is sometimes.
Yeah, I've so seen that one. Just,
I bet.
Yeah, I've had so many times when I've kind of thought, this is the way I'm going to do it, and this is the way it's going to happen.
No. No.
The universe has other plans.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you just kind of relax and go with what you've got, you start to begin to see you've always got what you need. You've always
and I think we can also see things like the NHS or social services or whatever, and we see it as a thing. And I've certainly done that, and I will do that from time to time. It's not a thing. It's just people. You know, it's people who are getting caught up in their thinking like we all do.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, if we find our own way of sharing this, our own language for sharing this, people will hear it. We're doing it anyway. So I'm sure you guys find this. You get people come and say, I really want to share the principles, but I don't know how to do it. It's like, were you having conversations with people, just ordinary conversations like, hello? And they're going, yeah, so well, you're doing it then. You know, it's not like you have to learn all this stuff and then you can share. We're just in connection all the time.
Yeah, and that's really, you know, a lot of what it's about, isn't it? And I think it's great. Like, for one of the things we do is bring people together physically in a room and then have a conversation. And like this, bring people together online and have a conversation and just kind of see, very much like you said, didn't think about what we might talk about beforehand, just get on here, see what comes out. And you know, to me, it's always, you don't know who's going to be listening. You don't know what somebody is going to hear. And I just think it's good to put it out there and open up a channel for somebody, open up a conversation, kind of say, there's something here to be seen if you're interested. Something here to
exactly
and see what unfolds. We're very much on the unfolding path at the moment.
Are you? I'm sure. And it's also saying to people, you know, I don't know, I've got something that you might find helpful. It's and also being much gentler with ourselves as well. I'm so much gentler with me now, because of course I still get caught up in, I spend probably most of the day in a kind of bit of a worried state or a kind of near state, you know, it comes and goes, and it's like, well, I'm just human. I've had 50 odd years of habit, and it's not that that's difficult to shake. It doesn't need shaking. It's just, I'm much gentler. I know that I'm doing it innocently. And everybody else is as well. And it's not to say I don't get annoyed with people. I still struggle with my darling mother, my darling mum, who I love to bits. You know? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We've all got them, and I've just spent 3 days with her in Devon over the Easter weekend, and you know, she was driving me crazy at times. But whereas before she'd be driving me crazy all the time, now it will come and go, and then the next minute I love her to bits, and I can see the innocence. So that's so normal. And not being frightened of the fact when she was driving me crazy. Not seeing that as, oh, I'm a terrible daughter. Poor mum, she's 85, she's got all this stuff going on. It's like, no, I'm just being human.
Again, not being frightened.
That's okay.
That's going through your mind in that moment. Not being frightened of what you think, not being frightened of the fact
it will pass.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't like the people that are closest to us like that, do we? You know, we have
absolutely. I know.
Very normal until you
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We might want to and wish things were different. That's human as well. But it's just like, well, no, this is the way it is. It's okay. And I think, you know, what's that saying? Integrity has no rules. I find that really helpful. So it's the same thing. Our innate health has no rules. When we're really connected to love, to who we are, we don't need rules. It just flows.
Yeah.
And I think that's been really helpful for me. It's just let it be. Yeah.
Let what unfolds unfold.
Well, I wrote a blog a couple of years ago. I should send it to you actually, because it's from when I was a child, and this farmer used to say, just leave and be made, when I used to try and help him get the chickens in. And I'd be running around, you know, trying to get these chickens in. He goes, leave and be made.
Sounds like Mr. Weeks.
Very Mr. Oh, right. Julie, yeah.
He's a wise man. I think a lot of, like you say, I think when we have kind of been like farmers and people like that who have lived in nature and have just seen, actually, do you know what? You can't control this.
That's right.
Try, you can exhaust yourself trying, but they've kind of realised, and certainly probably if they've been brought up in farming families, it's kind of known, You know, they don't even bother to try and discuss, oh, let's make it rain tomorrow, or let's make sure the sun comes tomorrow, or let's make sure the lambs are born to our convenience, not their convenience. Let's go. Because it's kind of taken as read that we don't control that sort of stuff.
No.
So they don't.
It's so good when we remember that. Yeah. It's like managed birth, isn't it? It's like, you know, the whole management of, my first child, it was a managed birth. The second one wasn't. My God, what a difference. Yeah. When I was left alone, it all just happens naturally. It's happening all the time. And we're here for such a short little period of time. It's like, let go.
And I think, we have definitely kind of lived through an era when it's like all these things. I mean, near where I live, Heartland, there is Heartland Quay, which supposedly, you know, is a quay where boats should come in. And for years and years, they've tried to build a quay. There's kind of a little bit of a lump at the end where it's left, and the sea just had other ideas. You know, there wasn't going to be a quay there. It's not going to kind of go out into the sea and have this great kind of thing. It's not
brilliant.
And it kept being rebuilt. You know, man was determined, but nature won. And I think kind of that's sort of what it's easy for us to do, isn't it? We make our mind up that something should be that way, so we try to make it that way, and then very, very gently we're shown, it's not gonna this is gonna happen. And if we flow with life, if we flow with it, then
because we are nature as well, aren't we? We're not apart from it. And I think that's really good to remember that. I think Oh, you're lovely.
Yes, we are. Lovely people webinar. This is it. We have fun. And we certainly, you know, that's one of the things that is high on our thing, isn't it? To just have some fun, hang out with some really nice people and have some fun. Because, you know, life looks like that's what it's for to me.
Yeah. And I struggled with that for a long time. That didn't make sense to me. I didn't know how to do it. I wanted to. And I'd see all these people like you guys. I'd have thought, oh, they're all having lots of fun, but I wouldn't know how to do it, how to join in. And that was, I'm finding that easier.
I think it's good, you know, having fun, and very much like when you're talking about sharing the principles and that, I think one of the things that we do when we do principle stuff afterwards, we go out to eat, or we go out for a walk, or we do, you know, we let them work the retreats. We've always got stuff. We did hula hooping, and we did singing.
Brilliant.
It's good to have fun.
It is. We're designed for that, aren't we? We forget.
Very much so. It's good to be human, and it's good, you know, we're here at the moment being human, so hey, be human. And don't be scared to be human. It's been great having a conversation with you. Has anybody? Oh, okay, we have got one more here. So Declan says, wow, thanks Mandy, you have a lovely gentle way of making this so normal and human. Cheers.
Oh, thank you. Do you know that actually means a lot? Thank you, because that to me is really important. It's to make it human, accessible to everybody. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
So has anyone else got anything they would like to say, or any comments or anything that they would like to share before we say goodbye to our lovely person? Julie, hang on, I'm not paying attention.
Oh, go on then.
I just wanted to say I could listen to you all night, Mandy. That was just beautiful.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you. I will say something on that, actually, because this has been an insight for me recently. When people give praise, I don't have to believe it or not believe it. It can just flow through. So it can be like a breath of wind that you don't need to do anything with, because I used to find that really difficult. Squirm making. And I would think, well, maybe one day I'll believe that. And it's like, actually, that doesn't matter either. I can accept it, and it's lovely to accept it because I don't have to do anything with it. I don't have to file it away as a truth. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes praise, people do find that very, very hard, don't they? We
Yeah.
don't like it when people don't appreciate us, and then when people say things appreciative, we find it difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Human beings.
Can't we?
Yeah, we're mad, aren't we? We're all crazy.
Quite mad, yeah. Lunatics have taken over the asylum.
Yes.
Oh, and Gavin says he totally agrees with Declan. I think we all agree with you, Declan. I think
That's lovely. Thank you.
it's been a delight and a pleasure to listen. It's always
Thank you
I
very
just love
much. Lovely.
listening to different people sharing this. I think it's, we get so much from each other. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing with this, Deborah. I'm, you know, I mean, you've only just come on my radar recently for some reason. And I just, you know, I looked at your website, and I've sort of seen some of your webinars, which I'm really looking forward to listening to, because I think what you're doing is fabulous. And Julie's talked about you, and it's just so refreshing. It's so easy and normal. And what was that, Julie?
I said it was all good.
Oh, it was, yeah. Yeah. No, it's gorgeous. Lovely. Thank you.
Well, I'm loving it. I absolutely, Wednesdays, it's like, whoa, who are we talking to tonight?
I
This is
know.
really good.
Yeah, I bet.
Listen.
Yeah, well, I think I might start turning up, because
Please do it.
that'd be really nice. Yeah.
It would be a delight to have you. We have some great
Thank you.
conversations, and we've heard, and it's the thing that's kind of, should have known this, should I? But the thing that I've absolutely loved is how different everybody is as well. I know some of the people that are on this webinar that have been on a few and come to some of my groups as well, and they've kind of said, wow, it's so across the board. The people we've had have talked about this in very, very different ways and very, very differently, and yet all of them have been so valuable in their way. There hasn't been anybody that I've kind of thought, yeah, that was a waste of an hour. It's all been, wow, I've loved that. No, you're fine.
Sure. Okay. It's only me that will deny that. No, I think it's fab. Lovely.
It's been really good. It's been great. Thank you. We really appreciate you being here tonight.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Turn up any week. We are always here at we start at 7, so we'd normally jump on a little bit before that. And the next week, I'm going to struggle to say this.
I know. I was going to let you say.
Yeah, I knew you were. Sorry, Sue. We've got Sue Pankovic, or however you say that. Going to be our new people guest, so she's
that'll be fun.
Talking to us, so I'm sure that's going to be great. I know, I have known Sue. I know Sue quite well, although I haven't actually caught up with her for a while, so I'm really excited about that.
That'll be lovely.
She also has a very, very delightful way of sharing the principles, so that's going to be great. So if you are free, Mandy, it would be lovely.
I'll make sure I am, I think. Lovely.
And anyone else? Becca, it was lovely to see you. It was lovely to see everybody. It's always good I love this get together. It's really, really great. So was there anything else that we are supposed to be?
We haven't got Beck.
Yeah,
she's poorly. We don't know what else to say.
Poorly tonight. And Beck is normally kind of makes me remind people of everything. So we haven't got Beck with us tonight. So
we've got a meet up tomorrow if anyone's around.
Yeah, if anyone is in the North Devon area, we have a meeting tomorrow night, and I know some people are travelling to come to our meeting tonight. That's absolutely allowed. If you want to travel here, it would be fabulous to see. We'll always find you a spare bed if you want to stop over. It's always
it's a bit full.
Put your ticket in for a bed. So we've got our tomorrow evening. If you're around, that would be really great. Is there anything else?
When's your workshop day next?
Our next, we also do once a month. We have a workshop day in Heartland, and I think that is the 21st of this month, and that's a day that we do. And again, if people are travelling, I sometimes do have spare beds. Although I am in the middle of moving house at the moment, so you might have to sleep on a box. But if you are in the North Devon area or want to come, it's always great to see people. We always have a really lovely day. Lots of talking, lots of eating, and lots of fun. So if anyone wants to do that, I think that's probably, I could stop the recording.